Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So, with the season winding down, I thought it'd be cool if we started to look at some of the teams that have been rebuilding over the last couple years and do a little bit of a video series that I am calling Rebuild Reviews, where we're going to go through what has happened basically since these teams started to rebuild and grade them on different factors and then grade the overall rebuild. The different factors are going to be draft and development, trades, signing/extensions, and then, of course, most importantly, the actual results of the rebuild as of right now. So yeah, we are going to be doing up first the Ottawa Senators, a team that I talk about a lot. People are probably going to assume I'm going to say the rebuild has been going absolutely amazing the way that I've glazed them the last two seasons basically. That's not the case. This rebuild has been rocky. Although they're in a playoff spot right now, it has not been exactly perfect. So here's episode 1 of Rebuild Reviews the Ottawa Senators. In the 2016-2017 season, the Ottawa Senators made Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals versus the Pittsburgh Penguins and took them to overtime. So this rebuild, it kind of came out of nowhere considering they were that close to getting to the Stanley Cup. Then the following season, they traded for Matt Duchene, eventually gave up a first-round pick that would become the 4th overall pick in 2019. And basically that trade kind of set them into the rebuild. They missed the playoffs, only had 67 points in that 2017-2018 season. They had the 4th overall pick, and it was time to rebuild. General manager Pierre Dorian was given the job in 2016, and ownership trusted him to execute this rebuild, see it all the way through, because they had been a highly competitive team basically since Daniel Alfredsson got there in like the late 90s, early 2000s. So yeah, we're going to go through the different aspects of this rebuild and starting out with the draft/development. Okay, so here is the draft record of the Ottawa Senators drafting/development. When looking at this, I'm only in terms of drafting looking at the 2018 drafted on. Development definitely matters for these 2013 through 2017 guys that they had once they started the rebuild in their prospect pool. For example, solid development job by the Ottawa Senators with Thomas Chabot, 18th overall. Played monster minutes. We'll talk about him more with the extension and how his extension aged, but very good development there. Drake Batherson at 121st overall in 2017. Great. What he has turned into for the Ottawa Senators. That's one of the better 4th-round picks of the last decade or so, or last 20 years. Outside of that, in terms of development with these guys, there's not much that you like. Joey Daccord developed in Seattle, not Ottawa. But yeah, not exactly development demons. We're moving on to the 2018 draft. And yeah, they had that 4th overall pick. They got Brady Tkachuk. They drafted him. I wouldn't say the actual act of drafting him was some galaxy brain rocket science. He was a consensus top 5 pick. But yeah, they developed him very well. First 2 seasons, 45 points, and then he just continued to grow and grow to the point where this season isn't quite his best season, but has been a 35 goal above a point per game guy. Good development by the Ottawa Senators. I wouldn't say I'm like massively moved, again, considering he's a 4th overall pick. In that draft also, JBD, who was recently traded away in the Josh Norris trade. This was not the best development. He played NHL games. He's not some next level bust, but for 26th overall, you would have liked to get more of a core piece going forward. Who else in this draft? Really nothing else. And they only had 2 picks within the top 9 or 3 picks within the top 90, but nothing to quite write home about. 2019, Lassie Thompson, bad pick in terms of this. He only ended up playing 18 total NHL games. So yeah, you can blame them for the draft pick there, and you can blame them for the development. Not that good by the Ottawa Senators. They did somewhat make up for it in Shane Pinto, but even Pinto isn't exactly killing it this year. For 32nd overall, it's still a good pick, but we had a little bit of higher expectations coming into this season. So 2019, Nothing really special. Again, they didn't have that 4th overall pick that ended up being Bowen Byram, so they were playing behind on that one. But the 2020 draft, they made up for it. This is definitely their magnum opus. Tim Stützle, from a drafting perspective, was the consensus 3rd best guy. Some people had him 2 ahead of Quinn Byfield, but damn good by the Ottawa Senators selecting him 3rd overall and developing him. He had a great 3-year development trend in terms of being just over half a point per game, then 58 points, and then really exploding. And he's been a legit #1 center, so good on them for that development. Jake Sanderson was more of not a not a shock on draft night. He was a consensus like 5 through 10 guy, but they took him at 10. They took him at 10, and he's been very, very good developmentally. Played some years at North Dakota, and he's now probably like a top 25 defenseman in the NHL. So you're seeing with Ottawa, they hit on their top 5 picks. They really hit on their top 5 picks. The rest is pretty shaky. Ridley Gregg, though, 28th overall, solid value, similar to Pinto. Not a game changer, an effective middle six forward. You take that in the range of like 20 to 40 overall. So solid development by them, solid draft pick right there. The rest, Tyler Clevin, he's an okay third pair guy at this point. Merrilainen could potentially be something. He like saved the Senators season when Olmark went down. So that was impressive. 2020, amazing. 2021, absolute shit. The exact opposite. Tyler Boucher, I think there's an argument that he's the worst pick in the entire decade. Like, I know that might sound ridiculous, but as I talked about in my draft videos, he was a projected late second, early third rounder, and he's not even a quarter point per game in the AHL right now. Brutal, brutal, brutal. And although it's not like they passed, there wasn't like some insane talent. Like the top 9 of this draft was crazy. They went with Cole Sillinger, Matt Coronado, Rosen, Kosa. Othman hasn't proved himself, but Bolduc's good this season. Like, they got nothing out of a 10th overall pick. Like, that is yikes. That's more so the drafting than the development with Tyler Boucher for sure. But even the rest of this draft, they had 2 other picks within the top 50. They recently traded Ospachuk in the Zetterlund trade, but still, it's not like he really made his presence known. He had 4 points in 43 games, definitely more of a physical presence, but nothing really there. 2022 didn't have a first-round pick because of some of the trades that we're going to talk about, but nothing in terms of looking like serious NHL players. 2023, they didn't have a single top 3 round pick, and none of these guys really are jumping off the page. And then 2024, I did not like the Carter Yakimchuk pick. Hand up. I was not a fan of this. I thought they should have went with Zane Barek, who is killing it at 107 points in the OHL. I think Yakimchuk can still be solid, but you do not like to see his points per game go down in his draft year +1. That is concerning. So in looking at the Ottawa Senators, man, they hit on their top 5 picks. Again, that's what matters the most with the rebuild. Hitting on your top 5 picks, the guys that can be franchise cornerstone pieces. Stützle, Sanderson, and Tkachuk still have another level to go to be like to turn this team into a true contender. But they hit on their top picks. The rest is pretty shaky outside of like Ridley Gregg and Shane Pinto. I think I'm going to go with a B, just because it's not like Stützle was first overall, Sanderson was second. Like 3 through 5 is still a decently risky place to draft. So I think I'm going to go with a B for drafting. I think that's solid. And another guy I wanted to mention when talking about development is Artem Zub. They scooped him from the KHL and have developed him. He was undrafted, scooped him from the KHL, and he's turned into a very solid top 4 defensive defenseman, one of the most underrated players in the NHL, in my opinion. So in terms of drafting and development, I'm going to go with a B for the Senators. There's definitely some flaws, but at the end of the day, they got 3 franchise, kind of high elite kind of guys in Stützle, Tkachuk, and Sanderson. They traded a bunch of their first-round picks that we're going to talk about where they didn't quite have the depth, and those guys didn't last that long on the team. We're going to move on to the trades now. Okay, now we are going to be grading the trades. What did Pierre Dorion and Steve Staios do the last 7 years or so in terms of acquiring or trading away talent to tear down to make this a rebuild? We're going to go through it, and up first, we have the Philip Gustafsson-Brassard trade. I bet you didn't even know Pittsburgh Penguins had Philip Gustafsson at one point. They traded away Brassard at the deadline and a 3rd-round pick in Vincent Dunn. It's not short for Vince. Don't worry about it. They didn't trade away Vince Dunn. For a 2018 first-round pick that became JBD, Philip Gustafsson, and a 3rd-round pick, as well as Ian Cole. Pure value, again, the first-round pick didn't quite end up working out in terms of JBD. Wasn't, again, some massive bust. But in terms of value, what Gustafsson became, although it wasn't on the Ottawa Senators, this was a really good trade in terms of just value. It just, they didn't quite see it through, and they didn't quite draft very good. So it was a lot of potential with this trade. And Brassard, it was time to trade him regardless. So that was actually a pretty good trade. The best trade of the rebuild was early on. I'm going in chronological order. Erik Karlsson and Francis Perron for Josh Norris, Chris Tierney, Rudolph Balcers, Dylan DeMello, and a bunch of picks. Obviously, that 2020 conditional first-round pick ended up becoming Tim Stützle, and that's really how they won this trade. They traded away their franchise defenseman, fully admitted, we're tanking, And as a result, they got the 3rd overall pick. San Jose was just grasping at straws at that point, just realizing like we still haven't gotten Thornton and Marlowe a cup. 2016 was now 2.5 years ago. We got to do something desperate. They traded for Carlson, gave him that 8-year 11.5, and then almost immediately they started stinking it up. Well, they had one good season, but then they really started to stink. And the Ottawa Senators massively benefited. Josh Norris as well was a highly regarded prospect at the time, but we'll talk about him more in the extension, but he definitely turned into a good NHLer when he was healthy. So yeah, to get your future franchise center and what you thought at one point was going to be a stud second line center for Erik Karlsson, who at the time was like 29, 30 years old, and the team sucked as of right now. This was a really good trade. On top of Dylan DeMello, who we'll talk about later, and they kind of sold a little bit too early on him. But yeah, great deal by the Ottawa Senators, by Pierre Dorion. One of the rare times where you trade the better superstar player for picks and prospects, and it actually kind of pans out in your direction. There's a different trade that we're going to talk about very soon where it didn't exactly work out. But next up, we have the Matt Duchene deal at the 2019 deadline. Matt Duchene to the Columbus Blue Jackets for basically a first-round pick. And that first-round pick ended up becoming Lassie Thompson. So it was fine value. It ended up being the 19th overall pick. You do that 10 times out of 10 in terms of value. It was solid by Pierre Dorion, especially considering he gave up a decent amount to get Matt Duchene. Ended up becoming the 4th overall pick. So the Matt Duchene experience, massive failure, but they did get a first-round pick out of it. You can't kill him for this. Zingle also got traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets for 2 second-round picks and Anthony Duclair. Second-round picks, they ended up trading one of them in the Matt Murray deal that we're going to talk about, and the 2021 second was traded as well to move up. So that was really good value, though, for Zingle. He didn't do much in Columbus. He didn't have a long-term plan, a long-term future in Ottawa, on top of Anthony Duclair kind of just being the better player. So that was actually a pretty good trade by Pierre Dorion. The one trade where they clearly lost, though, is the Mark Stone deal to the Vegas Golden Knights. Eric Brancham, Oscar Lindberg, and a 2020 second-round pick. Pierre Dorion opted for a young prospect instead of, say, like picks or a young roster player, and Brancham was a highly regarded guy. He was expected to be a very good top-pair offensive defenseman, but the evaluation was bad, considering Brancham never cracked it at the NHL level, was a little bit undersized, never became a full-time member of the Ottawa Senators' top 4. Mark Stone, on the other hand, already was one of the best two-way wingers in the NHL and finally got more recognition once he went to the Vegas Golden Knights, wins the Stanley Cup in 2023. And as for that second-round pick, it turned out to be Igor Sokolov. Another deal that did not exactly go in Ottawa's direction. They got a 3rd-round pick for Dylan DeMello. Dylan DeMello has turned into a really good top 4 defenseman for the Winnipeg Jets, more so of a defensive guy, plays with Josh Morrissey on a very team-friendly contract right now, 4 more years at $4.8 million, especially on that right side. The Ottawa Senators definitely would enjoy having Dylan DeMello right now. Not going to make or break their franchise, but definitely sold a little bit too early on him. Probably should have kept him around. 6 days later, they traded Jean-Gabriel Pageau, who is having an insane season, shooting something like 25%. He went to my New York Islanders for a 2020 first-round pick, 2020 second-round pick, and a conditional 3rd that didn't end up hitting. When looking at this was a really good deal by the Ottawa Senators. We're getting back on track because that first-round pick turned into Ridley Gregg, and that second-round pick was later traded to move up to get Tyler Kleven. So this was really solid. JGP, very good player at the time, but he was like 28 years old. There was really no future with him in Ottawa because of all the young guys that they had up and coming. So it was time to sell. They sold decently high, and although it ended up being a pretty late first-round pick by the New York Islanders, very good trade by Pierre Dorion in terms of selling. We're back to the bad, though. Matt Murray. They acquired Matt Murray for Jonathan Gruden, in the 2020 second-round pick. Not the end of the world to basically burn that second-round pick on Matt Murray. It was more so the contract that they gave him that really made this bad. Matt Murray would end up having an $8.99 in 2 seasons with the Ottawa Senators. Bad. They tried to fix the goaltending. Will not be the first time that they try to fix the goaltending in this video and fail. But yeah, Matt Murray was coming off a season where he only had an $8.99, and he just continued to play at that level. Not good by Pierre Dorion. Evgeny Dadonov to the Vegas Golden Knights. The Ottawa got a 3rd-round pick in Nick Holden. On its face value, not the worst trade of all time. Dadonov was a bad signing that they eventually had to deal. The problem with this is they didn't disclose the no trade list conditions of Dadonov's contract to the Vegas Golden Knights. They ended up getting a first round pick stripped away. It's either going to be this season, probably going to be this season. I would give it up if it's like, if you make the playoffs, or next season. They won't have a first round pick. It'll get removed. So this trade just looks infinitely bad because Pierre Dorian stupidly did not call them up. I don't think that they should have got a first round pick taken away. I just want to say that. But yeah, just incompetence by Pierre Dorian. The bad trades sadly continue for the Ottawa Senators when they traded Nick Paul to the Tampa Bay Lightning for Matthew Joseph in a 2024 fourth round pick. Nick Paul has turned into one of the best third line, if not the best third line center in the entire NHL, being around 45 to 50 point pace, very good goal scorer on a ridiculously cheap contract at only $3.15 million. Meanwhile, Matthew Joseph killed it to start for the Ottawa Senators, then signed an extension that we're going to talk about that aged pretty shittily. So as a result, Ottawa yet again lost the trade. Another minor trade when they traded for Travis Hamonic in a third round pick. He's just been horrible, like, for the Ottawa Senators. The third round pick is whatever. Like, he has just been a net negative player, and he somehow has a no movement clause right now, so they can't even waive him. It's bad in terms of the Travis Hamonic experience. In Ottawa, they swung for the fences on July 7th, 2022, getting Alexander DeBrincat. Did not exactly go very good, and they gave up the 7th overall pick and the 39th overall pick. And don't get me wrong, it turned out to be Kevin Korchinski and Paul Lewinsky, and those guys are not killing it by any stretch, but still, for Ottawa to only get one season out of DeBrincat when they could have used that 7th and 34th overall to potentially acquire a guy that had more term and maybe wanted to be there long term, or just draft different players potentially in that situation. Bad. The DeBrincat experience was pretty brutal, and the next trade to follow isn't really that much better. DeBrincat was on the team for 1 year, was highly productive, but not really to his Chicago standards, and the Ottawa Senators missed the playoffs by a decent amount. Also, that summer, the Philip Gustafson for Cam Talbot trade. They wanted to get some experience, and in fairness, Gustafson was unproven. He had a 9.05 in 27 career games with the Ottawa Senators, and Cam Talbot was coming off a season where he had a 9.11 in 49 games. So he was a veteran that had 3 straight seasons of being above a 9.10. It wasn't ridiculous in the moment. Obviously, it aged like crap. Talbot ended up having an 8.99 for the Ottawa Senators, but it was more so the defense was so bad in front of him. He only had negative .7 goals saved above expected, but he ended up leaving them to go to the LA Kings in free agency. Meanwhile, Gustafson has a 9.16 in 134 games. They potentially had their franchise goalie in their midst, as well as Joey Decord, who they let go in the expansion draft. And as a result, they had to go goalie hunting the following season. But we're going to get to that later. Another deal that has not aged well for the Ottawa Senators. Jacob Chychrun to the Senators for a 2023 first-round pick and a 2024 conditional second, in 2026 second. When looking at this, Jacob Chychrun, I respected the play just because Chychrun was so cheap. He had 2.5 years left at just $4.6 million. That was insane value. But they already had 2 youngish left-handed defensemen. It didn't really make sense. Chychrun, they missed the playoffs both seasons with Chychrun. He only had 46 points in 94 games. That first-round pick ended up being, again, a decently high pick, 12th overall, in Daniil Boot, who has been decently progressive at the productive at the KHL level. We got to see how he continues, as well as Mikhail Yegorov, who's that 2024 second-round pick. Arizona, now Utah, ended up trading for John Marino and giving up that second-round pick in the process. Yeah, Chychrun, they made a splash, but they didn't really come close to making the playoffs. They still ended up missing by like 6 points that season. And Chychrun's going to be in another trade that we're going to talk about. But we got to finish off the Alex DeBrincat saga. On July 9th, they ended up trading Alex DeBrincat after they couldn't come to terms on a contract extension for Dominic Kubalik, Donovan Sabrango, a 2024 first-round pick from Boston, and a 2024 fourth-round pick. So, yeah, they went from giving up the 7th overall pick and the 39th overall pick for a Boston Bruins pick that ended up being 25th overall. They somewhat do redeem themselves shortly after that we're going to talk about with that pick, but the overall DeBrincat experience, and especially considering they gave him to an in-division rival, a team that's also, that I'm going to cover eventually, coming out of a rebuild. They signed him to a cheap 4-year deal at $7.8 million. Not good by Pierre Dorian and the boys. At the 2024 deadline, they traded Vladimir Tarasenko to the Florida Panthers for 2 third-round picks. The condition did hit on that pick. It was a tough situation. When this first broke, I was like, what are the Senators doing? How do you get a third and a conditional fourth that could turn into a third if they win the Stanley Cup? Again, they hadn't won the Stanley Cup at that point. You thought it was the worst trade ever, but then you found out Tarasenko had a no movement clause. He wanted to go to the Florida Panthers. That was really the only spot he was wanting to get traded to. So it was either trade him to Florida or just swallow it and try to make the playoffs. They were already so far out of the playoffs at that point. And just out of spite, don't trade him to the Florida Panthers, I guess, and potentially damage yourself in the eyes of agents. So Steve Staios was the general manager at this point. He was kind of in a no-win situation, and the fact that they did end up winning the Stanley Cup, it became 2 third-round picks, so it wasn't exactly the end of the world. Now that we're in the Steve Staios era, we finally have some wins to talk about. They traded for Linus Ullmark, giving up that 2024 first-round pick that they got from the DeBrincat trade, Mark Kastelik and Korpisalo, 75% of Korpisalo's salary going to the Boston Bruins. Awesome deal. Awesome deal. Korpisalo still stinks in Boston. Ullmark has been very, very solid with a 909 and getting the Ottawa Senators to the playoffs at this point, as well as Letourneau being that 25th overall. It's not exactly killing it at Boston College. He has 3 points in 35 games. Kastelik's just an okay fourth liner. And with that pick, not saying Ottawa would have 100% selected him there, but yeah, for Boston, this is a bad trade. They traded, and this isn't a Boston roast video, but they traded away Ullmark, and Swayman took him for every penny, and they drafted pretty poorly, and Korpisalo is no bueno. So that's a win. Jacob Chychrun to the Washington Capitals with the Ottawa Senators, getting Nick Jensen in a 3rd-round pick. I understand Ottawa Senators fans. Chychrun was not exactly a good fit. Jensen, right-handed guy, so he can play on the right side compared to Chychrun potentially playing on his offside. Jensen was a better fit, but the talent level is just so vast in this, if that makes sense. Like, you're taking Chychrun every day of the week on top of it being a 26-year-old versus a 34-year-old. So again, they had no leverage basically at that point. Like, they weren't going to get, they could have gotten just like picks, I guess, but you were trying to come out of that rebuild. And Jensen has been important in terms of getting them out of the rebuild this season and making the playoffs. But yeah, the Washington Capitals got this guy for peanuts, and they did give him a decent amount of money. That's the other thing. Ottawa couldn't afford to give another left-handed defenseman over $8 million. But yeah, Chychrun has 18 goals, 44 points, has been great for the Washington Capitals. The Ottawa Senators lost the trade for sure. And then the last trade of the 2024 offseason, Matthew Joseph was packaged with the 2025 third-round pick for future considerations. Joseph, after getting traded for Nick Paul, signed an extension. He was not worth that extension, and with 2 years left on that deal, they had to detach a 3rd-round pick to him. Not good. Not good in terms of the Pierre Dorion era. Some of those extensions were good. Some of them were pretty bad, like Matthew Joseph. The last two that we're going to go over were at the 2025 trade deadline. Zetterlund, and basically they just went from a mid-second round pick to an early 4th-round pick. Very good by Steve Staios, kind of a buy low candidate. And Fabian Zetterlund, effective middle sixer, don't really give up that much in terms of value. You got to like that just pretty easily. Ospachuk, maybe he can turn into a good 4th liner, but nothing special. And then the Dylan Cousins, Josh Norris swap. I like this a decent amount for Ottawa. I liked it in the moment, and you got to like it more now, considering Norris is hurt yet again. Dylan Cousins has 8 points in 10 games, and they picked up a 2026 second-round pick that easily could be top 40 with the way that the Buffalo Sabres have played this season. That has been a win. So overall, when it comes to trades, it's kind of a tale of two general managers, because Pierre Dorion, outside of the Carlson trade, it was pretty bad across the board. You go with like a D+, C-. Steve Staios, as I mentioned before, definitely lost the Tarasenko and Chychrun deals, but given the situations were fine, and then had some big wins at the deadline in the Ullmark deal, he would get like an A-. I think overall, I'm going to land on a C. That Tim Stützle Carlson deal was just makes up for so much other shit. The fact that they got a franchise center out of that, as well as a guy like Josh Norris that eventually got them Dylan Cousins, I think I'm going to go with the C, maybe a C-. No, C. Again, just because that was such a heist. But there's a lot of bad in terms of their trading during this rebuild. It has improved a little bit. I'm going to go with the C-, actually. Okay, we're moving on, though, to signings/extensions. And it is better. It's not all great, especially early on with Pierre Dorion, but it definitely is better. We're going to be ripping through the signings extensions. Up first is a bad one, though. Colin White, 6 years, $4.75 million per. He got 41 points in 71 games in his rookie year, got some Calder votes. But after that, 50 points in 131 games in that contract. They eventually had to buy it out, and it was a decently hefty buyout that they're still paying to this day. They still have years left on it. Not good. Got tricked by kind of a lucky first-year, rookie year, secured the bag shortly after. No bueno on that one. Thomas Shabbat, 8 years, $8 million. At the time, Thomas Shabbat was swallowing like 25, 26 minutes a night. When he's healthy, I think that he is a $7 to $8 million defenseman. I wouldn't go north of $8 million, but he's a good offensive defenseman. The only problem is he cannot consistently stay healthy. In 2021, he missed 7 games, 2022, 23 games, 2023, 14 games, 2024, 31 games. His analytics have improved in the last 2 years because Jake Sanderson is kind of taken over as the number one defenseman, and Shabbat's pretty bad defensively. So in those big minutes, he got caved in a decent amount. Still an effective top pair guy. Doesn't play top pair because he's on the left side, and so is Sanderson. But a very good offensive defenseman, but not really worth $8 million because of those injuries and because of his defensive limitations. Sticking on the shitty contracts, Matt Murray, 4 years, 6.25. Again, they gave up a second-round pick, which you don't want to throw away, but giving him 4 years, 6.25 is bad. It's bad. He had a $8.99 season before, $8.99 in 2 seasons with the Ottawa Senators. They tried to fix the goaltending, and it imploded in their face. Evgeny Dadonov signed an unrestricted free agency contract worth 3 years, $5 million in 2020 after having a 70-point season in Florida, but he was mainly playing with Barkov and Huberdeau. It was kind of fake. It was kind of inflated. He was not worth it. He was not remotely worth it. He had 20 points in 55 games, and then they traded him to Vegas. They didn't tell him about the trade clause, and it really blew up in their face. Bad free agency signing, bad execution of the trade. The Dadonov experience deserves an F minus. Okay, now we're getting to some of the good contracts. Don't worry, it's not all bad because they extended Drake Batherson 6 years, $4.975 million. This was after the COVID shortened season, the COVID 56-game season where he had 17 goals and 17 assists. They decided, we're locking you up. And in that first season of this contract, it was looking like arguably the best contract in the NHL. He had 44 points in 46 games. Unfortunately, got hurt. Hasn't quite looked like that player since, but he's been like a mid-20s, mid-60s point guy the last 3 seasons. So this has been an absolute steal. And you're going to see with Pierre Dorian, he likes to pay his forwards early. And it worked out more times than not. Because shortly after, the next summer, he signed Brady Tkachuk on a 7-year deal at $8.2 million. There was some serious skepticism on this deal, considering he had not really fully broken out yet. But the following season goes for 30 goals, 37 assists, 67 points. I think we can agree Brady Tkachuk right now, if he was a restricted free agent or unrestricted free agent, would get an 8 by 10.5 or something like that, $11 million. He is the prototypical power forward, and hopefully this season in the playoffs, we can see that fully on display. Pierre Dorian makes up for the Dadonov free agency signing when he brings home Claude Giroux on a 3-year deal at $6.5 million. First year of this deal was crazy and essential for guys like Stützle and Tkachuk to really break out. He had 35 goals, 44 assists, 79 points. Was worth like $8.5, $9 million, not 6.5. He has kind of regressed the last 2 years, but even this season, last year still was like 64 points, and this year an effective two-way 50-ish point guy. So great deal by the Ottawa Senators, and he's probably going to re-sign on some kind of cheap deal because, again, he's from Ottawa. He wanted to come home. I don't see him like cup chase, maybe might cup chase, but maybe not later. I think he's going to sign a two-ish year deal and get more value out of this overall experience. Good signing on that one. Josh Norris signed an 8-year deal at $7.95 million after he broke out in the 2020 season with 35 goals in 66 games, and he didn't really shoot like that insane of a percentage. He only shot 20%, so they locked him up, and at the time, it wasn't viewed as that crazy of a deal, considering he looked like he was going to be a very good second-line center, and again, was like 22, 23. That's when they signed these deals. But then the injury started. The following season, only played 8 games, missed 32 games last year. Now he's not even part of the core, and that contract is looked at as one of the worst contracts in the entire NHL. But I think that is hindsight to say that it was a horrible contract in the moment. Most people agreed that he was going to be a stud. Also, in that 2022 summer, they signed Matthew Joseph, 4 years, $2.5 million. After he was traded, he had 12 points in 11 games. But then the following season had 18 points in 55 games, first year of that contract. And then as we saw, they had to attach a 3rd-round pick just to dump him. Then before the start of the 2022-2023 season, Pierre Dorian does what he does best, just gives a big contract to his young forwards and prays that it works out. He gives Tim Stützle an 8-year deal at $8.35 million. There was some concern around this, considering he only had been in the NHL for 2 seasons, hadn't cracked 60 points. But yeah, in the first year of, not even the first year before it kicks in, the last year of his ELC, he goes for 39 29 goals, 51 assists, 90 points. He has not quite had that productive a season since, but he's rounded out his game more, and he's a point per game #1 center at 23 years old. He's definitely worth 8.35, and this takes him throughout his entire prime for the most part until he's 29, 30 years old. Awesome deal. So they're 3 for 4 on their long-term forward extensions, at least from the guys that Pierre Dorian drafted. In the summer of 2023, after Matt Murray was long gone, they decided to target the goaltending position as well, giving Korpisalo a 5-year deal at $4 million in his one season with the Ottawa Senators. He had an .890 save percentage, negative 16.1 goals saved above expected, one of the worst goalie trios of like modern NHL history, and then he got traded away in the Omark deal. So yeah, here's the deals with some other like smaller ones. I included Hamonic's 2x1.1. I don't know how he got a no movement clause. Tarasenko didn't really quite work out. Amadio, Perron have been fine. Pinto 3.75 is pretty solid value, as well as Ridley Gregg locked up for the next 4 years. I went with the B+. They locked up their core. Their core 3 is locked up at great cap hits, but early on there has been some absolutely travesty of deals with White, Murray, Dodonov. There's some really bad deals in there. Korpisalo. So you can't quite go A- A when you have that bad of deals on the books. But yeah, the key deals they did pretty damn good with outside of Josh Norris. But again, that's more so like injuries. And Thomas Chabot also has been injured a decent amount. I'm going with the B+ for the signings/extensions. Now, in looking at the actual results of the Ottawa Senators, I know this might sound crazy to say considering they're in a playoff spot right now, but I think I'm going to go with the B-. We've previously been talking about them coming out of the rebuild. We thought 2023, oh, they got Alex DeBrincat. Oh, this is when they finally make the playoffs. Last year, still have Chychrun, get Korpisalo. This is the year. Now it's finally the year. And again, that's why you can't give it some kind of bad grade. But to say that the Ottawa Senators have dominated this rebuild in terms of results would just be lying. It's definitely good compared to last year making the playoffs and then this year not making the playoffs. We'd rather make the playoffs this year and be treading in the right direction. But they're in a wild card spot. They're safely in just because like the wild card 8 is like a disaster. It's not like they're this team on pace for 98 points safely in. So yeah, I think a B- is fair in terms of the actual point production from this team in recent years. I think B-. So overall, our 4 grades are a B for drafting, B+ for contract extension, B- for results, and a C- for trades. I'm going to go with a B- overall for this rebuild. Again, at the end of the day, they did succeed in getting core borderline franchise pieces. None of those 3 have solidified themselves as true superstars in the NHL. Not saying that they won't, but it still hasn't happened. So I can't confidently say that this rebuild is going to result in high-level contendership or safely making the playoffs going forward. The problem is right now, in part because of the Yakimchuk pick, they don't really have anything in the system that's going to improve this team massively. Like, they're still young. I know that they're still young, and some of their players have levels that they can potentially get to. But I'm not sure that this team is going to be a consistent contender unless Tim Stützle becomes the 5th or 6th best center in the entire NHL. Jake Sanderson becomes a legit perennial Norris guy. There's just not that next wave when we talk about some of the other rebuilds, like a Montreal Canadiens and having Ivan Demidov coming up or Jacob Fowler. Like, and maybe Levi Marilyn turns into a Vezina level guy. But like right now and looking at it, I think they're going to be a playoff team the next couple years. I think they could go on a run or two. Their style is very playoff oriented physicality, but in terms of getting to that next level of when looking at other teams of recent memories, like a Florida Panthers, like a Tampa Bay Lightning, and also it hurts out there. It's in Ottawa, like the taxes and all the situation. Weather isn't great, but yeah, I think overall, I think a B- is fair for this rebuild. There were some egregious mess ups and wasted draft picks where I could see you giving it a B. I don't think you can give it a B+. I don't think you can say B+ is very good. I don't think that this has been a very good rebuild. I think there's been some mistakes. At the end of the day, they're going to be a team in the mix for a while. Not favored to win the Stanley Cup, not favored to win the Atlantic Division probably, but it's solid. It's not Buffalo, which we're going to do Buffalo, and they'll probably get lower than a B-. But I think at this point, you can't be mad if you're a Senators fan right now, but this rebuild has definitely left. There's more to be desired. And maybe they hit on a Nikita Kucherov 58th overall pick. That's always possible to potentially get it. But actually in the fold, like, not to be dramatic, but if they had Zane Parekh coming up within the system right now to be their number 1 offensive defenseman or top offensive defenseman with Sanderson on the left side, I would be thinking different. I'm not like that. I hate to, I'm such a Zane prick Glazer, but like that would single handedly bring it up to a B right now. They just don't have much within the system. And at this point, compared to after the 2023 season with Stutzla, I'm not sure he's going to become a top 10 player in the NHL. I'm not. Like, I don't top 15. I think he's going to be top 25, top 30. But if he's your best forward, I don't know if you're winning Stanley Cups. Brady Tkachuk kind of is what he is. Very good player, but top 30 to 45 player in the NHL. That not quite Matthew Tkachuk, if I'm going to be honest. So, yeah, let me know in the comments. What do you think about this rebuild review? I bet people expected me to give this a B plus, A minus. No, you got to be objective, not subjective. I hope the Ottawa Senators go on deep playoff runs, but right now I think it's been an okay B minus. Let me know in the comments. What do you think? What team should I do next? I think I might do Detroit just because similar to Ottawa, they started and they went like nuclear. When looking at some of the other teams like Montreal Canadiens, they had the 3rd overall pick in 2018. Then they make the Stanley Cup in 2021. It's all over the place how to like define their rebuild. Let me know in the comments. What do you think? I'll be seeing the next one. Peace.